I am back with Jane Hadley, who just read a sample of A Fine-Looking Soldier. And like I said, there was so much fun about that scene. The soldiers around them being just ding dongs, as you said. I loved that you had their training, like that they were bad at marching. There's just a lot there.
That's just
And
historically accurate. Like they were bad at marching at that time. They were really
yeah,
bad
I
at
was I was gonna
and
ask how much of this was inspired by you like interacting with this history and being like, oh, I want to write a book about this.
a lot of it was. I had read a book about women who had dressed as men or people who were assigned female at birth who dressed as men to enlist in the Union Army. And there's so many interesting stories and they're so dramatic. There's a woman who is named Sarah Edmonds and she was a medic and then she like had this really close relationship with this other guy and they shared a tent, but then she started sharing a tent with a different guy and it kind of all blew up and then she like just ran away. It's great. I'm like, why is this not an entire genre of romance novels? I would read these all day long. So, trying to be what I want to see in the world, right? Decided to write over the pandemic, and I didn't think it would be as hard as I really just could not stop researching this book. I have a whole array, like all of these books behind me, all of these ones are all related to this story, and I've
Wow.
relied upon them for information.
Well, there is obviously a long tradition of this history and also historical romances with characters who are women at the beginning and then like, go undercover as men for various reasons. Sometimes it's not in armies, but often it is. And so it's a trope that we've seen. There's real history behind it. And then we also have a more modern understanding that people's gender is different from the sex that they're born with, and that perhaps some of these instances in real history might have been, people finding a new gender identity. I was curious, as you approached the story, how did you think about it with our modern gaze looking into this historical phenomenon?
I've struggled and thought about this a lot because I conceive of Charlie as a character who in our modern parlance would identify as something along the non-binary spectrum because she's really, really deeply uncomfortable with the things she's being asked to do as a woman with marriage and child. Like she's deeply does not want to have children and she really doesn't want to be in the domestic sphere. Like none of the things that is are expected of her are things that she wants to do. But she also, on the other hand, doesn't really have an enormous amount of like gender dysphoria in terms of her body. She's fairly comfortable in her own skin. She feels like her body is a liability for her. And so it's been really, I really, really love gender dynamics, gender roles. This is something that I come back to again and again in my books because it is clearly something I need to write about. So I think for her, that builds across the story and throughout the first book, and then also in the second book, she really has to think about who she is and what she wants and who she wants to be, not just in the army or in this war, right? She's using a lot of her deeply held beliefs about morality and humanity and justice to justify going into the army. But once she gets there, she feels like herself and she
Mm,
can speak her mind in ways that she wasn't able to before, and she finds a great deal of freedom in that.
yeah.
And that's really interesting. That's been super interesting to explore and to think about. And I try to do it as sensitively as I can because we all have different, like so many different people have so many different experiences with gender. And
Mhm.
so this is one.
That sounds very interesting. I also was picking up that, we know that she has a different name that she had before she enrolled. And then Henry's like, well, is it Charlie or is it Smith? So even within this new identity that she's created, she has multiple identities that are
Yeah,
fracturing.
yeah, because she kind of has this shell or this armor that she wears, which is Smith. And then as as Henry starts to get to know her better, he starts to see what's underneath that armor and finds that he quite likes it, quite
Mhm.
likes that person. And he has a lot of kind of exploration to figure out what that means for him, because that's also, being in love with somebody who's walking this edge of genders is not something he ever imagined. Like in the mid 19th century, the gender binary is really, really separate, right? There
Yeah.
is not gray space in between that in terms of like in a cultural way, right? So there's no gender neutral pronouns. They really don't have language or tools to talk about this.
Mhm.
So that's something that they have to kind of figure out. And I really wanted to keep that language as close to what I thought they would have. So pronouns has been has been an issue as I've been writing.